Hi everyone, welcome to Invent Your Mind. This is Gayani. Today I'm bringing another interview with a super cool person, Tristan Higgins. My usual disclaimers as if you have watched any of my videos and if you haven't, welcome. Thank you for joining. And I am actually an attorney in California, and I practice intellectual property and business law. I do transactional work, meaning I help clients, businesses get their trademarks, copyright patents, or create a LLC or corporation. Those IP, intellectual property, I support clients all over anybody who want to file in US. And this interview series is just kind of getting to know other professionals, other companies, and it's kind of my passion project. So this video is probably going to be about 30 minutes, unlike my other videos, which are bite-sized, meaning under 10 minutes. So with that, one last thing is that remember that this is for informational purposes only. This is not legal advice. If you have a specific question, please do go consult with the attorney in your area that practices in the field. So with that, I will love to introduce Tristan. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Hi.
And Tristan is an internationally recognized leader and a speaker on diversity and inclusion, workplace equality, and employee affinity groups. She speaks at corporations, law firms, other entities. So this is a real treat for us to have her join us to kind of give some tips and also talk about how she got to this. She just launched her own company last year. So before that, she'd been with a big corporation for about 10 years. So I will let her kind of go more into that, how her path shaped. And so with that, Tristan, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Gani. Thank you for having me. It's a great honor.
Thank you. And I had to say, I have known you for I think at least 5 years or something, if not longer. And I was looking at your bio on LinkedIn and I didn't realize your undergrad is actually in theater. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty cool. So what were you thinking of when you were growing up, actually? Just curious.
Sure. Well, when I was a kid, I was into everything musical and everything theater. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be a director on Broadway. That's what I'm going to do. And so I got a theater degree from UCSD, which is, I was lucky enough, it's a great theater school. Yeah. But then I had a motorcycle accident while I was there, and it drastically changed my view of lawyers. Up to that point, I just thought they were, ambulance chasers and then all the negative stereotypes. Yeah. And my lawyer who helped me with that accident was so wonderful. He literally was like a white knight. And I thought, ooh, maybe I want to do that. That sounds really, I've always been a good arguer and I've always been really obsessed with things that are fair. And I thought, okay, well, instead of being a director, maybe being a director on Broadway, let me be an entertainment lawyer. And so I finished up my UCSD degree with the expectation that I was going to go into entertainment law. And so I got my degree in law. And because at that time, because I'm a little bit older now, there wasn't a lot of entertainment. There wasn't a lot of law schools providing entertainment law.
Yeah.
I went to school locally here at California Western. They had some entertainment law classes. And I was given the really good advice at the time that I should go into whatever type of law that I like and do really well. And then I can transition or pivot, as is now the word, over into the entertainment law space. And so that's what I did. I was very lucky to work for the city attorney here in San Diego for about 5 years. Oh, wow. And while I was there, I started, being ready to become an entertainment lawyer. And I was driving up to LA monthly for networking groups and meetings. And then I found a position at the Screen Actors Guild, which is now called SAG-AFTRA, because the two unions joined. And I worked there for about 5 years. And that seems to be my magic point, is 5 years. I like to, And so while I was at SAG, I loved it. I loved everything about it. I ended up getting to advise the SAG team in the video game negotiations for a new bargaining agreement. And in that process, I thought, wow, these video game people are really cool because they're very, very creative, like and producers and directors, and they're also incredibly smart, like techies, like the people who are writing programs. And that really appealed to me. And I was able to find a position with Sega. Okay. So I started in Sega in LA, right where I was from SAG, running their big amusement arm. So the big like House of the Dead and Elk Hunter and all of these kinds of big arcade games, like old fashioned. Oh, wow. Kids today probably don't even know what they are, but the big ones where you would put a quarter in. And so I ran that group for them. And then I got promoted and went up to San Francisco and ran what people think of when they think of Sega, which was the Sega publishing arm. So I was the director of North American legal for Sega. And that was a wonderful experience. It was my first time dealing with any kind of product that you would sell to the consumer, right? Like actual box video software at the time.
I do have a question, Tristan. When you're in these companies, are you a litigator within the company? Are you handling all sorts of different things? So what is it like? That seems like a lot of different, aspects going on when you're in a company.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, when I was with the city attorney, I was handling jury trials. I handled DUI, prostitution, minor drug offenses. They were all the misdemeanors. Okay. So I had about 18 different jury trials, which is amazingly fun. And,
that's a lot of experience.
Yeah. And that was the standing up in front of the jury, which was very much like an audience and, telling a story on behalf of the people of the state of California. That was amazing to be able to stand up and say that. And when I went and so that was all litigation. Well, not even litigation, it was all trial work, prepping cases, reviewing cases, meeting with witnesses, police officers, interviewing, doing, all of that, and a couple of appeals. And then when I went to SAG, it was all union work. So it was all mediation because everything at the Guild is controlled by binding arbitration. And so I had, 50 to 100 different mediations for things as simple as like a stolen cell phone on a set of a movie to, multi-million-dollar claims because no one's received residual payments from a very successful movie. And so I got to work with people you've never heard of and then people you really heard of, but that was much more, it's kind of a hybrid, I think, between transactional and litigation because it's not pure litigation. We weren't really doing discovery and things like that, but it was definitely a more of a litigator's focus. And then when I went to Sega, it was all transactional, right? So that was when I was at the point where I was handling contracts, reviewing, giving advice. I certainly wasn't the general counsel, but picture it kind of like a mini general counsel in that business group, helping them with pretty much everything they need, advising the CEO and advising HR, reporting to the general counsel in Tokyo. And then the same thing when I was up in San Francisco, very, very much. San Francisco was actually kind of a blend because I was overseeing all of North America. So I was working with outside counsel on complicated lawsuits and also handling transactions and a budget and things like that. But I would say that I'm predominantly a transactional lawyer. When I ask me, I describe myself as an entertainment and technology lawyer. Really sort of high tech stuff is my kind of jam. And but I've had the benefit of being able to do jury trials and litigation.
That's super cool. So then you ended up in Sony.
Yes.
And then before you just launched, so maybe a quick thing about Sony, being at Sony, I'm guessing it's similar to what you did. And then why you decided to launch your own company.
Right. Well, I can't say enough good things about Sony. I left Sega in San Francisco to come back home because I'm a local kid. My folks are here. And
that's San Diego for people who are watching because
sorry. No, it's under the sea, can't you?
I know.
So I moved back to San Diego. I was lucky enough to get an entertainment technology position with Sony, which was insane.
Yeah.
They wanted someone who could launch their digital cinema business. So for anybody, I guess younger than millennials, film in movie theaters used to be on these giant reels, and when we play charades, we would have this, this symbol. Now we don't have that. Somebody pushes a button and the movie runs from a hard drive. And so I was handling all the legal affairs for Sony, first in the US and then internationally, as those movie theaters that you have down the street from you were being converted from that the reel to reel, film to hard drives. And so that's what I started doing there, which was wonderful. And I did that for the first couple of years until the window of business closed. But in the meantime, I was working with all of the main studios up and down in LA every week. And then they transitioned me to handle a different part of the business that was really foreign for me. I was handling manufacturing and image
Oh, wow.
sensors. Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't know the first thing about it, but I was learning how to, image sensors, that's what is in your camera, your phone, everything you can think of. And Sony image sensors are in a lot of other people's products.
Mm-hmm.
And so as part of that sort of Sony business, people think of consumer, which is, your TV and your old Walkman and your PlayStation,
Yeah.
things like that. Then there's the business to business, which is like studios, big studios filled with recording equipment, and churches, banks, things like that, that need all that sort of high tech information. And then there's the components business, which is the part I was really lucky to work in.
I do know that just as a science side of it, that Sony make microscopes and they do all these life science stuff too. So it's like Sony, you wouldn't really think of it as, you think of it as media entertainment. But
Right.
yeah, there's so many, sides to these companies that
Yeah.
sometimes you're not aware unless you're in that field.
That's right. I mean, Sony, think of it, imaging, anything that uses imaging.
Yeah,
So
that's
medical,
what it is.
imaging where you're
Mhm.
sending a camera into a body, or security cameras, all of those things. I didn't get to work
That's
on
what
all
I
of those.
meant actually.
Absolutely. And, and then also batteries was the other main component. Now they've sold that business off, but it meant that I got to negotiate with companies like Motorola and Apple and Google. And it was just fantastic. And I learned all of this information. I got to go to the image sensor factory and actually put on the cap and the suit and the mask and the booties, and have the air jets, clean me off before I got to walk in. It was amazing. And so it was a wonderful experience. And I just kept learning. I kept learning new things, and I just loved it.
So, obviously, like you've been practicing for law for, it sounds like 2 decades at least.
Yeah, 23 years.
Wow.
I
And
started
then
when I was
now,
one.
I know, exactly. We all did. So,
That's right.
and now you start this brand new venture, which is really a big part of corporations and any kind of a business setting about diversity and inclusion. What is the next step? Not just talking about those initiatives, how to implement it. So can you kind of talk about why you decided to launch and what your company does now and the tips? I did ask Tristan to share some tips with us as usual with any of my interviews. So, go into that part.
Sure. Well, I've been doing the same thing, obviously learning new things, but I've been doing that for a really long time. And I just thought about a change in that the things that I've been doing for all the companies I've worked for without, as part of my day job, was helping with diversity and inclusion. It was making sure that their employees felt they were included, they were welcome to bring not just their whole self to work, right? That's sort of the phrase people use, but their best self to work. And I thought I would like to do that full time. And I had a little break, and I was talking with a career coach, and she said, well, what's your dream job? And I said, well, my dream job would be to be a professional speaker. And she said, well, why don't you do that?
Yeah.
Light bulb, and so, through all this, working with different people, and I've come up with the idea that that's my new shingle is meh-tuh-kloo-siv. And it's a word that embodies everything I'm talking about. I made it up. So you can't find it in the dictionary yet, but who knows, maybe in a decade it'll be there. And the concept is, that you have a space where it transcends diversity and inclusion, and everyone feels like they belong, that they're valued and respected. And I think the thing for me, when people say, well, what is it that you do? I want to talk to companies who they've already spent a lot of money on diversity and inclusion, right? They've taken a lot of steps to make things better, but maybe they aren't getting better scores on their engagement, or their employees don't seem happier, or they don't seem to have more diverse employees. The people are still leaving that are diverse, or they're not coming that are diverse. And so what I really help them focus on is this concept of belonging. And the good news about that is it affects everyone. It's not just the people who look like me or you, it's everyone. It's the people, the CEO, all the way down to the very newest employee. And that seems to be a good message. And I'm really happy that I think there's a lot of evidence about focusing on that and how it can really drive your business.
I think that's a very important point, because while you may have some initiatives and consultants who come in and say these are the policies to like show, and then of course, every corporation kind of out there have these saying these their, principles, the policies, their mission.
Mhm.
right? And then
Right.
there's that, and then there's the implementation and tracking and seeing the attrition rate, right? Like why are these the groups not changing, or why are these like why is still the bottom line look very similar, or you make very fractional leadway if you did any. So like looking at those to kind of like fix that and bring it up to the next level.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really what I'm trying to focus on is, there's a lot of people who do this work. And there, for example, there's a lot of lawyers who can come in and do really
Yeah.
excellent work on your policies and your procedures. What I'm really talking to companies about is how to tie all of that together and how to really translate it from the page and from HR or your executive who's particularly focused on it, and really get it into the workspace so that it makes a change in the way people feel and
Yeah.
the way they interact. So that's what I'm really hoping to help create.
Yeah, I love that, because I do think, like at companies I've been at, and even as a scientist, that, and as a woman of color who been in STEM, there are places you feel you walk in and you don't feel included, because,
Right.
and, for me, I'm in intellectual property. And when I first started going to some of the events, there isn't that many science-based people who are like me, who are practicing in this area, and you walk into a group, is mostly what you think of when you think of attorney, like, was the old model, right? And that's part of the reason why I launched this channel, also to kind of change the view, because I am kind of sick of like seeing, like, when you think of an attorney, you think of a white male,
Right.
like the traditional, like that. And those, they are allies. I mean, don't put down any kind of a gender or race, really, but you also want to think there are so many different versions of these professionals. And I
Yes.
think having being on a platform, being out there, is really important to advocate for that and showcase it. Because I tutor like kids sometimes, when I haven't done it lately, but I used to do that for a few years. And that was really nice, because they got to see an attorney and they were like, what? You don't go to court?
Mm.
So it was very interesting, because they are, you could tell that you're switching their mindset to
Yes.
kind of see,
It's huge.
so.
I mean, changing the default assumption
Mm-hmm.
is really powerful. And it doesn't mean there's less room for the people that fit the default. It
Yeah.
just means that the definition is broader. And that
Yeah.
really reflects what's the case today. I mean, it's not just you and I that are different than that old model. I
Yeah.
mean, there are as many women lawyers as there are male lawyers, men
Yeah.
lawyers. There are, ever increasing lawyers who are people of color, or people who are
Yeah.
different gender expression or gender identity, sexual orientation. And so it's time really for that old model to be expanded a bit. And then that does
Yeah.
have that wonderful impact, like you're saying, of reaching little kids. Like if I get to talk to a little kid, a high school student or younger, who sees me
Yeah.
as a corporate lawyer, and then thinks, wow, I don't have
Be
to
that.
fit the mode that I thought I had to fit, right? And
Yeah.
that's really powerful. And you and I are both doing that. So that's
Yeah.
a wonderful thing.
Exactly. I think that's the key. Like, I think, even like little things you do, like corporate presentations, how you use the stock pictures. I think you had to pay attention to it, because I remember where I was putting together a presentation, and a friend of mine helped me to kind of get the presentation formatted. And I looked at the presentation, and I wasn't really happy with the stock pictures there that they have chosen, because it's all were not representing me. It
Mhm.
was, but that's because what that was available. That was the challenge.
Right.
So I do think, we had to infiltrate these levels, and the discussions we are having today hopefully will shape that, like these kind of discussions and these kind of activities,
Mhm.
because and paying attention to those details. Not everybody can do it, but if you can, or even pointing it out to people who might be doing it, because like I make sure when I do a presentation, I'm representing the people of color, people of different gender preferences on those things, if I could find the pictures, right? And
Right.
that's really important. And I really think, when you go to these websites that hold pictures for stock file, I really wish they expand on that, like show that women entrepreneurs, so people who have, like LGBTQ that are in different roles and very successful.
Yes.
So,
There's even a new project now that I think is open source. It's free to use, that are new icons that are focused on African Americans in the workplace.
yeah,
And I mean, how wonderful is that, right? You
exactly.
kind of put together a presentation. Not everybody has a bald head and that little, curved girl hair, right? So
Yeah,
the more of
exactly.
that we can have, the better. Absolutely.
I think it's really matter, like, it's little things is because there's messaging involved.
Yep.
So with that, let's get to the 5 tips that
Okay.
you wanted to share. So,
All right. 5 tips. So the first one I think is to be brave.
okay.
If you are, as far as being an entrepreneur, right? That's sort of our
Yeah.
focus. I
Yeah.
think that,
Startups and entrepreneurs out there.
yes. So in order to start something, I think you have to be brave, that you really have to have faith that what you're talking about is important, that you can do it, because you're the only one who can sell yourself, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't have faith in what you're doing, I think that you will not be successful. And if you can have a safety net, great. If you can't have a safety net, I mean, maybe you just need to jump, but definitely be brave. That would be number one. Number two, I would say be yourself. I wouldn't be getting anywhere if I was trying to be what I thought a diversity and inclusion expert was supposed to be like, right? First of all, many of the diversity and inclusion experts have special degrees or certifications in diversity. Now, I'm relying more on my legal background and my expertise, but I don't necessarily fit that mold. And
Yeah.
I realize I bring something different to the table. Now, I would never denigrate their experience,
Yeah.
but you don't have to be just like everyone else. In fact, you probably shouldn't be, right? If you're trying to start something new, then there's a huge benefit to being yourself.
Yeah, I do think that's, for me, like I just launched my own practice and I do this like YouTube channel and all of that. And this, like I see like a lot of attorneys are now getting on YouTube, and because they see the value to it. But
Mhm.
for me, this is a passion project, and I really wanted to do this as a way of connecting with the community, because I've been watching YouTubes for a while,
Mhm.
and I have learned so many different things, from YouTube. Even how to like straighten my long hair was came from learning from a YouTube video, because I have very curly hair actually. So to how to blow dry and, how to try to get it under control was somebody I watched several YouTube and was really grateful.
That's fun.
So,
Yeah,
and
I
I
mean,
do have to say, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, nowadays, that's where you turn for anything, right? How do I change this, socket? How do I
Yeah.
write this memo? I mean, all of those things are on YouTube. So I totally get that.
Exactly. And I do have to say, being yourself, by the way, Tristan, when I first met you, I think I was actually at law school at the point when you first came and spoke. But you made an impression, because I also remember thinking, wow, she works for Sony and she have a mohawk. That's super cool.
Yeah.
So I do think, just, people recognize that, and that's a way to connect too.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it's important, you don't ask permission to be yourself, right? Like I
Yeah.
didn't go into Sony and say, hey, would it be okay if I get a mohawk? I mean, I just shaved my head and walked in the next day. And if you're good at your job, it maybe doesn't matter. Sometimes it might, of course, but I
Yeah.
think that you create the space for yourself. And I think that if you have humility about it, but also confidence, it's
Yeah.
really hard for other people not to. Now, are there
Yeah.
people who probably didn't like my hair? Of course, but they never told me that. So,
Yeah. I think that's the risk you take, right? There are certain times you could take a risk. I mean, of course, also number of years of practice. So you have to always weigh how much of it, what is the cost and benefit, and how much of it, if you feel like you're suppressing yourself, is it worth staying in a job that's, you don't feel like you're yourself?
100%. I
And
mean, when
stuff.
I first got out of school, Gani, I didn't even have on my resume anything that would show that I was a lesbian. And that
Yeah.
was a long time ago. And I, even when I talk to students now, I try to encourage them. It's okay if they feel like they need to take that off. Now, I would
Yeah.
love it if they didn't. You
Yeah.
need to get a job. You need to work. You need to be employed. And sometimes, at least 23 years ago, it was easier. At least I thought it was. Maybe it would have been fine. But to get in the door and show that I could do the work and that I was good at my job, and then, open up. But yeah, that's probably a whole nother interview.
I do think so. I think so. And I think it's also, like you said, it's a personal choice. It's
Yeah.
definitely is. Don't do it because you feel like you have to do it. Do it because it's resonate with you. That's my
Right.
always,
Right. But I mean, I think
okay.
to go back to it is really, do you want to work somewhere that isn't going to accept you? I mean, I think you said that a second ago.
Exactly.
That's really the main thing. So it's a balance, right?
Exactly. So what is the next step then?
Okay. So we have be bold, be yourself, always be learning, right? So I think some people say always be selling. I think for me, it's really always be learning, because even though I could run legal for a fairly large company if I needed to, and I would be comfortable doing that, I don't know very much about running my own business. And so I am always learning. I'm, shout out to the Hera Hub, where you and I are both members.
Exactly.
I'm part of a co-working space like Guyani, as you probably talked about it before, that's filled with other women entrepreneurs, and they share their expertise, and I am listening. I am attending as many things as I can virtually. I'm taking notes. I'm trying to learn from people who know what they're doing, because if you have this attitude of you have to know everything, well, first of all, you can't know everything. And second of all, that's exhausting, right? So why not learn from all the other people who've done amazing things like this channel, where you're watching other people, and everybody has a different story. But I think you always have to be learning, every time. Like, for example, I finished my website and I was really excited about it, and I thought it was great, and I got feedback and it was all good. And then some other people took a look at it, and I was able to get their feedback, and now we're making changes, right? So always be learning. I think that's really important.
And be humble about it. I think that's always help. I do the same thing when I launch my own practice. There's, you know how to practice law maybe, but you know, it's running a business very different, and marketing is different, and how you connect with people. So it's a very different side, but it's fun if that's part of what you like doing. Like, I love doing this. So I think it shows in your energy too, when you are out there. And if you're doing it because you have to, that's also shows, I think. So I think if you had to figure out what work for you and what doesn't, and if it doesn't work for you, maybe worth hiring somebody who does it for you.
Right. I mean, without, in the beginning, I think you try to do everything,
Yeah.
but you realize fairly quickly that you're not good at everything. And so there are some things that you need to spend the money to have somebody else do. Like, I paid a web designer, and he did a wonderful job. And at the time I was like, oh, I haven't made any money yet. And it was, but it's so important. It's so important.
It's prioritizing too. Like, I have the same thing, like my, like I prioritize what I could do, and some things, maybe down the line, I will invest more money into it.
Right.
But right now also, as a business owner, you had to make sure you could pay all your bills and, keep off of red, basically, or going black, or whatever they call it. See, again, accounting isn't my thing. So,
red is bad, black is good.
That's what it is.
That's all you have to remember.
I'm like, I know there's a red and a black, and I just like, I figure red is bad. It's got to be right.
So my next tip is very much related to that. Shall I just give it? Hire an accountant. Somebody told me when I first started, they said, I said, what's the number one thing I should do? And they said, hire an accountant. You need an accountant, and you need the accountant to help you figure out your business structure, as well as, a lawyer like Guyani, figure out, are you a partnership? Are you an LLC? Or what are you doing? And then have that accountant be right on board from the beginning.
Yeah.
Now, I've done that, and it was a very good suggestion. And so I would say, make sure that you do that. Was that number 4? Yeah, that's number 4.
Yeah, that's number
Maybe
4.
Maybe it should be number 1, but
And I think what's great about right now is there's a lot of accountants and all these resources that are not the traditional way. So if you look into it, like, there's virtual accountants who could support you, and you could find a really good one if you have, like, do some research. Like, my law firm model is virtual too. That's why I work with Hera Hub, because it allows me to keep my overhead low. So I could, I don't have to raise my pricing to keep up that, a location. So I think those things, they are tips that works, and again, YouTube is a really good resource to figure things out.
Yeah.
You know, okay, the next step, I think the number 5.
So number 5 would be have faith. I started with be brave, because you need to be brave in order to make that launch. And I
Yeah.
think number 5 is to have faith, because you need to stick with it, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
you have to have your reality of finances and things like that. But, if it's that you need to figure out what kind of savings do I have and how much time do I have. But I would say that it's going to take longer than you think it is. So, for example, I technically started this business about a year ago, and I'm not really making any money. You know what I mean? Like, it's not
Yeah.
yet. I mean, right. So
Yeah, it's
it's
getting
been
out
all about,
there.
it's been about building. It's been about, making those connections. But I'm confident that I will. And so I think you have to have faith. Like you said before, it's nice to have a safety net. And I would just suggest, stick with it. Obviously, every decision you make, whether it's a positive or a negative, you're still learning from it. You're still moving yourself forward. And sometimes it just takes traction, right? You need time. So that would be my 5th one, is just have faith in what you're doing. Of course, you're taking feedback, you're making changes, but have faith in the core of your idea in order to keep going.
And confidence with that faith. I think that's another way to say it, to be confident with what you decided to do, that you did it for a reason.
That's right.
Because I remember when I launched, and after I launched, I had several places that I had applied for jobs to, because I was at a firm and I was trying to go in-house, and I had put in my applications. And of course, some of the bigger companies takes about 6 months before they even see you,
Right.
like your resume. So I had internal recruiters from those companies who reached out and said, hey, you want to come for an interview? We have this position. We think you will be great. And you're like, no, because once you like commit to a path, I think it's worth giving that path. You want to give everything you can, because while that would be nice to have that safety net for the paycheck once a month or twice a month, whenever,
Yes.
it's like building a book of business is a little more challenging. At the
Yes.
same time, you don't want to yank around, so like these are companies I would have loved to work for. If they had came like maybe 6 months earlier, I would have like been like, okay, yeah, like let's go. But when I was launching, it was the option was to either go to a law firm, another law firm, or launch. And it's commit to it. And when you have things, you just had to say, okay, well, what can I do? How could I do it?
Yeah, I want to see it through, right? I want to see it through. I like I said, I'm not really money's not really the thing yet. It's more of a passion, but I'm trying, and I think I'm building a structure. I've done a lot of events for free and a lot of training and a lot of talking, and my hope is that it will really grow now, and that I'll be able to afford a nice aquarium instead of this green screen behind me. So,
I do like that screen because it's kind of goes along with your mohawk. It's kind of synergistic.
Funny. It was not intentional, but thank you.
That's how it works. So anyways, so I don't want to make the interview too long. So what I will do is anybody who want to connect with Tristan, have questions for her, I'm going to put information below this video. Feel free to connect with her. She have amazing background, good ideas. She said she's been practicing law for 23 years with the corporation. So even though this is a new part of yours, new company, you're like, you've been doing this anyway. So, and I do know that you've been highly involved with the local bar communities. I'm sure also not local, but more even statewide, so this is nothing, it's not like your first rodeo, right?
No, it's not.
So I will put all that information below, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you
and
so much.
Maybe we will do another video at some point, talk about all these other things we talked about.
Thank you. I love what you're doing, and thank you for including me in it, Granny. It's really special.
Thank you. I appreciate it too, you joining me. Okay, until next time, see you. And if you have any, if you like this video, please like, share, subscribe. And if you are checking out my other videos, I have a lot of resources and information for entrepreneurs and startups. Check those out. And if you have any comments or ideas about future videos, let me know. I would love to hear from you. Again, like I said, this is a passion project, so I'd love to connect with you. So thank you again, everybody. See you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.